This video goes over sample problem number 3 and focuses on the American Opportunity Tax Credit, or AOTC. Let's read the problem. Anne Marie Bissell is 28 years old, unmarried, so that's either single, head of household, or widow. She graduated from LTC in 2014. Right away, it should come to mind that she probably had and used the American Opportunity Tax Credit for 2 years when she pursued her associate's degree, right? AOTC could be for 4 years, so she has 2 years of eligibility remaining. Maybe now she'll use them. Just something to keep in mind. Next, she worked and had earned income receiving the W-2 showing gross wages of $55,000. Where does this amount get reported on 1040? What line? $6,500 was withheld, deducted from her paycheck. This is prepayment of tax. What line is this reported on Form 1040? Line 17, okay? She had $375 of unearned income in the form of interest. And is this taxable or non-taxable? We know that this goes on line 2 of Form 1040, but is it 2A or 2B? And if 2B, is Schedule B required? It's not required. We know from the previous videos is that interest less than $1,500 is not required, or dividends less than $1,500 is also not required. And then this next section, it's all about her education. So then, at this point, do we know her filing status? Single, head of household, or widow? And based on her filing status, how much is her standard deduction? Let's go over the last part of the sample problem 3. Anne Marie knows the value of education, so then she decided to enroll in school in the fall of 2019 to the Georgia State University to pursue her Bachelor's of Business Administration. And she received a 1098-T, that is a form from the school showing how much tuition was paid during the year. And she can use that to file her individual tax. Now, this form is needed in order for her to get any credits, meaning tax credits. She is considered half-time student. For the AOTC, must be at least a half-time student. She incurred the following expenses during the year: tuition $3,400, books $800, and city parking deck $360. Do these expenses qualify for receiving education tax credits? Tuition, yes. Books, yes. City parking deck, no. Let's get familiar with 2 big tax credits related to education. First one is the American Opportunity Tax Credit. Its purpose is to help the low-income and middle-income students lower the cost of higher education. So right away, you should click that high income will not qualify, and so it will be subject to phased out reduction of this credit as income is higher or has a threshold limit. The AOTC is available for the first 4 years of post-secondary education. These 4 years do not have to be consecutive. The student could go to college for 1 year, get the credit, and then let's say stop, but then enroll again 5 years later and finish the education. The rest of the 3 years would also qualify for the credit. The student must be pursuing a bachelor or associate's degree or pursuing vocational training. Keep in mind that the school attended must be an accredited institution. How much is the credit? It's $2,500 per student. 100% of the first 2,000 of qualified expenses paid. So that's 2,000. And then the next 2,000 is 25% of that next 2,000. And that's 500. So 2,000 plus 500 totals 2,500 per student maxed amount of credit. The credit is meant to be for low income and middle income students. So those that are part of the household that have very high income, it would be subject to phased out. For a single head of household or qualifying widow, the income starts to phase out between 80,000 and ends, meaning completely phased out, at 90,000. For joint income filers, it's double these amounts. So the range is 160 to 180,000. How is the phased out calculated if the individual, for example, has AGI of 82,000? Let's see. The calculation is AGI of 82,000. That's how much the taxpayer makes, minus the lower amount in the range. What is the range? It's between 80 and 90,000. So the lower amount is 80,000. Take AGI of 82,000 minus the lower amount in the range, 80,000. So you have 2,000, and then 2,000 divide by the range. And what is the range? Range is between 80 and 90,000. So that's 10,000. 2,000 divided by the range of 10,000, that's 20%. And that means a reduction of 20%. Take 20% times 2,500, the amount of the credit. Then that's a reduction of 500. Instead of getting a credit of 2,500, the taxpayer is getting a credit of 2,000. It reduced by 500. More qualifications on this tax credit: must be pursuing a degree or a recognized credential, and must receive the form 1098-T from the school. 1098-T indicates that the school is an accredited institution to receive this, for the taxpayer to receive this credit, and then must be enrolled at least half-time, and full-time is 12 credits, so half-time is 6 credits or more. Okay, and cannot file if married filing separately or if the taxpayer is listed as a dependent on another taxpayer's return. So what type of expenses would qualify for the education tax credit? It would be any academic fees like tuitions and books, but no room and board, no non-academic fees. Expenses that are not related to the student's course of instruction do not qualify. For example, city parking do not qualify as qualified expense and receive credits for it. Qualifying expenses must be reduced by any tax-free scholarships, grants, or other educational assistance. So let's say the qualified expense is 10,000 from tuition. However, there are 3,000 of scholarship and another 1,000 of tuition reimbursement from the taxpayer's employer. So that's 4,000 that would reduce the qualified expense of 10,000, and the remaining would be 6,000 that qualifies as tax credit. And recall how much is the credit? The max of 2,500 coming from 100% of the first 2,000 and 25% of the next 2,000. Let's go back to the problem and see how much the taxpayer qualifies for the education credit, the American Opportunity Tax Credit. The American Opportunity Tax Credit is reported on line 18C of Form 1040. It is a refundable credit, and we must fill out Form 8863 and find out what the line 8 balance is, carry over, and report in line 18C here on Form 1040. So let's do that. Form 8863. This is Form 8863, Education Credit. Use it to report American Opportunity and Lifetime Learning Credits. What's very, very important on here is that it says complete a separate part 3 on page 2 for each student for whom you claim in either credit before you complete parts 1 and 2. So we have to go to part 3 first and fill it out for each student. Here we only have one student in this problem, but for your exam you have 2 students, so you would do part 3 for each student. So there are 2 part 3 sheets that you have to fill out, but only one part 1 and one part 2. One more item needs to be stressed. The AOTC is 40% refundable. This is very, very important. Again, the AOTC is 40% refundable. Recall what refundable means? It means money that could be refunded. Could be in terms of payment back to you. Let's say that the tax liability is $1,000 and the tax credit is $1,500. If this $1,500 is not refundable, then you will not get the $500 refunded. If this $1,500 is refundable, then you apply the tax credit and have $500 refunded. In this case, AOTC is 40% refundable, meaning that 60% is not refundable. So you would apply the AOTC that's non-refundable to the tax credit, and then the 40% will be refundable. And that's what you see on Form 8863. Line 7 here is the $2,500. That's the max amount of the credit, right? But 40% of that is refundable. So 40% of $2,500, $1,000 is reported on line 8. And the remaining non-refundable is reported on line 9. But before we get to this point, let's go to part 3. Remember that part 3 must be filled out for each student who you are claiming the credit. Fill out the name, social security number, the school, and it asks questions to see if the student qualifies for the credit, such as, did the student receive the Form 1098-T? Does the school have an identification number? Has the credits been claimed for 4 years yet? Was the student enrolled at least half-time? And then jump down to line 27. Lines 27 through 30 is essentially the calculation to see how much of the expenses qualified. Remember, it's 100% of the first 2,000, so that's why we see line 28 is 2,000, and then 25% of the next 2,000, which is 500. Therefore, on line 30 we see 2,500. That's the max amount of this credit that could be qualified. So from here we carry over to part 1, line 1, 2,500. Back to part 1. On line 1 we input 2,500. This is the balance that was carried over from part 3. The 2,500 is the qualified expense. On line 2, we enter the threshold, 90,000 for a single, head of household, or widow. If it's married filing jointly, it'll be double that, 180. But in this case, what is the filing status? It's single, so it's 90,000. And that is the amount of phased out, complete phase out when AGI is above that. Line 3, we input the AGI. AGI comes from line 8B on 1040. 55,375. Line 4 is a calculation. It's the difference between the threshold and the AGI. Then line 5, we input 10,000 because that's the range. The range between 80 and 90,000 is the phased out. Line 6, we input the rate of 1 based on the instruction telling us that line 4 is higher than line 5. If it was the opposite, then line 6, we would input something different, a different rate. Line 7 says to multiply line 1 by line 6, so the rate of 1 times 2,500, that gets us line 7, 2,500. That's the amount of the credit. Then line 8 is to multiply line 7 by 40%. Recall 40% is the refundable portion of this credit. So 40% of 2,500 is 1,000, and then 60% of the remainder of that falls under non-refundable credit, 1,500. And the total of these 1,000 and 1,500 equals to 2,500, right? But it's split between 40% refundable and the remainder non-refundable. It says enter here and on line 2 of the credit limit worksheet. So let's go to the credit limit worksheet. This is the credit limit worksheet. It's from the instructions for Form 8863. Although this is 2018, it's really no different from 2019. Besides this one change, instead of line 11, it's 12B. What this worksheet does is it takes the numbers from Form 8863, populates in here, and then compared to the amount from 1040 line 12B. Then we see the smaller of the two, the smaller is 1,500. It means that we are okay with this 1,500 to use as the credit. The reason is because it's smaller or less than our tax liability of 5,357, and we can apply all of this credit to this tax liability. Note that line 12B reports the tax liability 5,357, but there are no other credits that's applied and reduce this tax liability, so it remains a full amount of 5,357. And when we compare to our credit from the AOTC 1,500, we can use all of this credit. Back on Form 8863, Part 2, non-refundable education credit. So we know that there is 1,500 of non-refundable credits from the AOTC. 40% of it is reported on line 8, and so the remainder on line 9. And then are there any other non-refundable education credits? In this problem, there is no other, so you will go through it and find that it should be blank or 0. Line 19, we enter the amount from line 7 of the credit limit worksheet that we just did. On here, this line 19, and on Schedule 3, line 3. What is Schedule 3, line 3? Remember Schedule 3, line 3, it's the additional credits and payments. We had this from Sample Problem 2, where we did the credit for child and dependent care expenses, line 2. We reported $750 in that sample problem. Here, we're not dealing with any child credits, but it's the education credits from 8863. So we populate this 1,500. And we carry down to line 7. There are no other credits. So line 7, the total is 1,500. Enter here and include on Form 1040 line 13B. 13B is where we report non-refundable credits. And don't forget name and social security number. So let's go to line 13B of Form 1040. Here's 1040. See line 13B, it says add Schedule 3 line 7. 1,500 of non-refundable credits, but we also need to add in line 13A, which is child tax credit and credit for other dependents, but 0 in this problem. Therefore, it's only the 1,500 in line 13B. But isn't the American Opportunity Tax Credit we calculated and on the Form 8863 total to be 2,500? Here we are only entering the amount of the non-refundable credit, 1,500. The remaining is refundable credit, and that goes on line 18C. It would be 1,000. That goes on here. American Opportunity Credit from Form 8863 line 8. Let's go back and take a quick look. Here's Form 8863 again. Look at line 8. Refundable American Opportunity Credit. What does it say? Enter the amount here after you do the calculation, 40% of line 7. Enter the amount here and on Form 1040 line 18C. Then go to line 9 below. We already did go to line 9 below. but we had not looked at this before, line 18C. So this $1,000 gets reported, carry over to line 18C of Form 1040, and we did that. Line 18C reports American Opportunity Credit. 1,000, that's 40% of the tax credit. This credit only. This credit, American Opportunity Tax Credit, for this taxpayer in this problem, it's $2,500, and it's split. 40% is refundable, and that gets reported in line 18C, the remainder in 13B. For this problem, the tax in line 12A, look up the tax based on the taxable income and the filing status in Appendix A. Line 17 is the prepayment of tax that's given in the problem, $6,500. That amount combined with all of the refundable credits are reported in line 19, and that's considered the total payments. Compare the total payments, line 19, to the total tax reported in line 16. Compare the two and see how much was overpaid and refunded to you. It may not be overpaid, but it is in this problem. And the amount refunded to you in this problem is how much? It's between $3,000 and $4,000. That's the range, just to give you a sanity check. Don't forget to review the problem after you complete them. Make sure there are no missing information, name, social security number. Make the check mark where it's needed and sign and date.